Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Now, I know it's been a while, but I'm back on the Transit Custom. I did a video on the front discs and pads a little while ago. A load of people have asked me for the rears. Believe it or not, I've had an ABS fault that's been coming on and off on this van. Basically, you'll be driving along, ABS traction control, hill start, hill assist, not possible. A couple of faults. So what you tend to find, you switch it off. You get back in it the next day, you start it up, the light's on, you drive quarter of a mile and then it goes off. So, been a bit of a phantom fault. It's been coming off. In 6 months, it's done it 4 times. So, nothing to worry about, but I just thought it could do with brakes on the back end. Turns out that's the fault, so I thought I'd just run you guys through this. So, yeah, whether it's for how to do rear brakes on these Transits or if you've got this ABS fault, stick around and we'll run you all through it.
And if you get value from this video, hit the like button and subscribe to support this channel.
Right then guys, so a bit of backstory. Basically, I've had this ABS fault, light comes on. I'll show you the fault code. So the fault code over here is basically saying tone ring for the right hand rear wheel. Obviously on the front, it's a lot better design. The back isn't really old fashioned. It's almost like a cog that can corrode. So basically I knew there was something wrong on that wheel. The discs are really rusty, so that's kind of giving me suspicions there. But I just thought I'd show you. I've already teared it down. I will run you through a full tear down and replacement of rear discs and pads on this van. But I just thought I'd show you first of all what we're dealing with. So basically if I show you the rear disc, you'll see. If I show you the ABS cog, which runs on the back. So this is the hub where the wheel bolts, and you can see here you've got this cog around the outside, and basically if I turn it, you'll see down here half the teeth have corroded and chipped off. So basically it's a real simple one. Obviously them teeth are giving a bad signal to the ECU. It's losing its wheel speed every now and then and putting the fault code on. It's probably finding the wheel speed straight away, but it's too late. The light's on and it stays on. Hence why you have to switch it off, switch it back on, drive it down the road, and then obviously the light goes off. So yeah, nice easy job guys. Obviously rear disc and pads are kind of bread and butter on these things. It's a lot easier job than the front. If you've seen my front video, it's a bit more complicated because the hub, you kind of got to pull it off and it's a bit awkward and you've got to take a drive shaft out. The back is way simpler. But there's 1 or 2 things that you really need to look out for. It actually caught me out on the other side, and I'll show you when it comes to the bearing and actually getting the hub away from the disc. If you're not careful, you can separate the bearing and you won't get the hub back on. So I'll show you what to look out for, what to do, what not to do, and basically run you through it like last time. So yeah, super excited for this one guys. And yeah, let's get on with it. So just thought I'd run you through what tools and equipment we're going to need and what we're going to go through. So 1/2 inch bar, obviously you get the wheel off and the carrier bolts. Then we've got I got a ratchet here with a 12mm socket. Now it can be 13, but this one's 12. 19mm socket to hold the sliders while you're taking these bolts out. A pair of pliers, because sometimes the telltale wires can be a bit tight and you need a good tug. Just be careful of the wires. And then we've also got a 36mm socket, which is for the hub nut. I've got a 3/4 socket here, so I've got an adapter to 1/2 inch, so it fits my bar. I've also got a T50 Torx, which is for the actual main disc bolts. So again, adapted that to 1/2 inch to fit my bar. There's that. I've also got a 15mm socket, which is what the carrier bolts are, so we're going to use that. I've got a 21mm socket for the wheel nuts. Now if this doesn't fit, they can sometimes be a 22, but if they're in good condition they should be 21, so you might need a 22. 1/2 inch ratchet, screwdriver to get the caliper off. I've got a chisel for cleaning up the carrier. I find it good for chipping the rust off. I'll show you that in the video. I've also got a puncher for getting the hub away, the wheel bearing or hub away from the disc. I've got a brass one, but any punch will do as long as you don't hit the bearing. I'll show you further in the video, but yeah, just a warning. torque wrenches. Now, you only need one that goes up to 300 newton meters, which is what this digital one does, but I've got two. I've set this one at 72 for the hub, for the disc bolts, and then I've got this set at 300 for the hub nut. Now, there is a different type. I'm guessing it's the twin wheeler, but there is two different torque wrenches. Torque settings. I'll explain that when I come to it. A hammer, because you never know when you need to hit something. A wire brush, some red rubber grease, which is for the sliders. Now, you can use any grease on the sliders as long as they're not petroleum based, because anything like that will eat the rubber away, and obviously then the water will get in. We got some copper grease, which is again for lubing all the pads up, making sure it's all nice and free. I got some multi-purpose grease here for just, you know, lubing the hub up to put the hub on, and I've got some Loctite. Now, this is low strength. I prefer medium, but it's all I got today, so that's what we're using. And as for parts, I got my disc, my pads, and my telltale wire. Obviously, this is only one set. I've already done the other side just to set up for this video, so that's all ready. And I've also got an ABS sensor because I'm going to all this trouble. Obviously, the exciter ring is on the back of the disc, but obviously I'm going to change the sensor. This was 30 quid, so I'm going to change it just to be on the safe side. So here we go. Let's get at it. Right, now I forgot to mention the caliper wind back tool, which is the tool that we're basically going to use to push the piston back in these calipers. Obviously, these calipers are handbrake calipers, so they need a proper tool to wind them back. So this is the tool we're going to be using, and I'll show you that later in the video. Right then, so here we go. So the first thing we're going to do is obviously get the caliper disassembled. Now you can see the rust on this thing is really bad, but we're going to go ahead and take this top bolt. Now mine is a 12mm socket, but some of them may be 13. It kind of depends on what pads. Sometimes the pads come with them, sometimes they don't, but this one's 12mm, so I'm going to go ahead and whip out the two bolts. So there's one in the top. Now you'll notice I've got a 19mm spanner there on the slider, because the slider can spin in the caliper. So what can happen is when you undo them, they can just spin around, and obviously the best thing to do is just to get that out of the way. So we've got that there now. You can see the sliders there nice and loose. So the next thing to do now is go to the bottom. Now there's another one here down the bottom. Again, same process, and we'll crack him undone, and then he'll start spinning. So we'll go ahead and put the spanner on him. There she goes, and we're going to loosen that off. So once we get this bolt out, we're going to have to disconnect the wire. So we just get out of the way. There you go. So the next thing we're going to do is the wire for the pad wear sensors. So we're going to go ahead now and pull it out of the bracket and unclip it from the actual harness. It's just got this little tab you kind of push in and then pull it out. They can be really tight. Just don't pull the wires, because you can rip the wires out of the plug and do damage. So the best bet is just to basically go ahead and just pull him out. You can see there the seal's gone out of shape, but I'll sort that after. Then it goes up and round the caliper, and you'll see there's like a rubber boot on the bleed nipple for the caliper. You just need to pop that boot off so you can get that wire out, and then we can go ahead and remove the caliper. So I got a screwdriver here just to give it a kind of a pull and kind of get it away. Just catch it and then lower it down. Now this does hang on the handbrake cable. Obviously you don't hang calipers by brake pipes, but this is a nice solid handbrake cable, so it's not going to hurt. You can see the rust there on my pads. Now these pads are pretty much done. If I take this one out here, you can see the pad wear sensor, the disc has started to cut through it. So that was just a matter of time before it was bringing the light on. So I'm going to pop the outer pad out now. Again, this one's pretty low, just as bad as the other one. And there you go. Oh, one of the clips there stuck to the pad, so make sure you don't lose any of them. Try and keep them with the carrier. So the next thing to do now is to take the carrier bolts out. So there's two of these. These are the 15mm socket. It's a bit awkward, the angle I'm in now, because the camera's in my way, but just be careful of this ABS wire. You'll see now I kind of pull it out the way with my fingers to undo them bolts. Obviously I'm replacing the sensor, but obviously when you do yours you might find that you don't want to damage it. So, but to be honest with you, without the camera here I could have just done it a bit easier, but yeah, I had to sacrifice to get the camera in there. So I'll just fast forward this now. So obviously whip these two bolts out. So there we go. There's a bit of editing for you. and we'll get that out the way, and then we can go ahead and pull the lower one out as well. Oh, yep. Now this one was quite tight all the way out, but these do have a bit of thread lock on them, so they do tend to be tight. Now once we got this off, I actually struggled a little bit to get the carrier off the disc due to the rust. It's surprising how bad it was. So I just got a screwdriver then and just give it a bit of a pry and just popped it off. So it's not the end of the world, but yeah, that rust was pretty bad. And there you go. So the next thing we're going to do now is undo the actual disc mounting bolts. We don't need to do it now, but it's easier to lock the hub with it attached on the van. So you can go ahead and take these bolts out here. Now this is a I think it's T50 Torx is the size of socket for this, and we can go ahead and whip these out. You'll see they're just like a countersunk Torx bolt. And then what I've done there, you can see I've put a pry bar across the studs just to hold the hub so I can undo it. And like I said, it's easier than trying to do it on the floor. You could do it in a vise if you've got a vise there, but I find it way easier just to do it before I take the hub off. So the next thing I'm going to do now is remove the hub nut, which is that 36mm socket. You'll see here she is quite tight, but a good pull on the bar undoes that. And then we'll get that whipped off. Now once you get this nut off, there is a washer, but you'll struggle to get it out without a magnet. So what I normally do is just pull the hubs off and then grab it. But you'll notice that this hub was on there. Now the other side fell off and this side was quite tight, but like I said earlier, a good tap with a hammer, give it a couple of wallops on the back of that flange, not on the disc, on the flange, and then it just comes nice and free then. So I could go ahead then and slide off the hub. Now there's that washer I was mentioned, so obviously take that away, make sure you don't lose that because you need that for the spacing. And there we go. So there we go, we got our hub off now. I just wanted to show you this ring. So you can see this toothed ring. Now that is actually part of the disc, and you can see them tooth are all started to break up and come away. So this is definitely my problem. This is what's been causing my ABS light to come on. So the other thing that's to look at as well is if you look at the sensor here, this little stick kind of plastic sensor sticking out, you can see the build up of, well, basically metal. So this is metal filings or rust or whatever that's come off and is basically stuck to the sensor. Now this can also give the sensor a bit of a bad reading, so yeah, we're going to change the sensor. But if you were to do discs or pads or anything like that, I would strongly advise make sure you clean that sensor off. You can see there's a bolt there to get the sensor out, but obviously don't take it out unless you're going to change it. And then the wire comes round and you'll see there's an electrical plug that I've unplugged by here. There you go, and that is the ABS sensor. So obviously I'm going to replace that just to be on the safe side. So we got my hub, so I got 2 blocks of wood. Now you'll see here I've lifted him up so there's a gap underneath to allow the hub to fall away from the disc. So you'll see by here where my finger is, this is the metal of the hub. Now you don't want to hit obviously the disc, you want to hit the hub but not this center. You see this bit that's turning, this is the wheel bearing. So what I'm going to do is put my punch just inside. Now you could use a disc or like some sort of race or something, but I haven't got anything to fit, so I'm just going to use a hammer and a punch. Now I'm going to keep hitting it either side. Now this did take a while, so I'm just going to skip forward to when I got it nearly out. There we go, you can see she's dropped down loads. I just kept hitting alternating sides, and you'll see here now it's just kind of finishing it off. Now the bearing itself, you've got to be careful it doesn't pop out. Now if it does, it's not the end of the world, but what you need to do is you need to remove, in the middle of the bearing there's a clip. Now you'll see here now, you can see inside there's 2 halves to the bearing, and in the middle there's a clip down where my finger is. You can just about see a recess. Now them 2 bearings need to be pushed together and that clip, so you need to push this in and make sure that clip. Now if this bearing is loose in any way, get a pick, fish that hook out, push the side down. Now what I like to do is put something like a socket underneath to basically put pressure on the other side of the bearing to stop it dropping, and then basically push this side down and then reinsert that clip, and when it snaps in it should hold the bearing together. Then, like I say, it's just the force of hitting it with a hammer can cause it to jump out. So next thing we're going to do now is we're going to clean up the surfaces where the disc mounts. So you've just got this ring where my hand is, and then obviously the surface. Now there's the new disc, all nice and clean. Now some of these are covered in oil, this one isn't, and even if it did have a little bit, it's not the end of the world. If it's got oil on it, just give it a brake clean. You can see there now I've cleaned that ring up. Now when you drop the hub on, it should just drop on and then be nice and loose. Now if it's tight, maybe you want to clean it up a little bit more, but mine just dropped on and you could turn it so it was all good and make sure it was home. So next thing we're going to do is put some Loctite on the mounting bolts for this disc. And like I say, this is medium strength. Low strength. I like to use medium, but this is all I had at hand, so that's what we did. Now on the bench, I'm just going to nip these up. So you can see there now I'm doing a bit of a star pattern with what I do. And basically what I'm going to do is just go around them and just give them a firm nip just to make sure it's held together nice and tight. And then what I'll do is I'll tighten it when I get it back on the van. So, and there we go. So you can see here now, there's my new sensor, look, all nice and in there. I put that bolt back in. I have put some copper slip on him just on the bolt to make sure it doesn't seize. I fitted, they come with the retainer that clips into the axle, but there. Clicked him in and then plugged him into the connection. So this by here now is we're gonna give this a bit of grease now just to lube it up a little bit and make sure it goes on. But the next thing now is to wind the caliper back. So this is that tool I was on about earlier. So you can see now there's a right and left hand thread. This one is right hand, but the opposite side is left hand. So you've got to remember to wind this one clockwise, and then the other side has to be round anti-clockwise. So obviously the kit comes with the two, so you need to make sure you got the right one. So I'm going to go in. So I'm going to go here now and locate this in. Now it's got a plate that locates into the two grooves on the piston. So I'm going to locate it and then wind this back until it locks in there. And then you can go ahead and wind it down. Now I didn't mention there is actually different plates for different calipers, but you'll see in the kit it kind of comes with everything you need, the kit I showed you earlier. I will try and put some links in the description to these items if you need to get them for yourself, but to try and help you out. But yeah, as you can see, I've wound it back till it's stopped. The problem is now it tends to pinch the nut and jam itself on there, so you need to undo that with a pair of pliers, give it a wind. And then what we do is remove that tool. Now there's one more thing we have to do, and I'm just going to show you the brake pads. So you can see the one pad has got the notch for the sensor, and it's also got a pin in the middle. Now the one with the pin in the middle actually goes on the piston side of the caliper, but it has to locate into that piston. Now you can see these two tabs are not straight with the caliper. So as you can see, it's not going to line up with that pin. So what I have to do is I have to turn this piston so that it lines up with that pin. So what I'm going to do is take this plate back off so it doesn't wedge in there, and I'm just going to shove it into the caliper. Now if your caliper is nice and free, you should be able to just turn it just by applying a bit of pressure, turn it until it's nice and straight with the caliper. Now it doesn't need to be perfect, but it does need to be somewhere near. So there we go, we've got that nice and straight. Now the next thing, we're going to put a little bit of grease on the axle. This is literally only to make sure it comes back off the next time you do it. You could go ahead and slap it on with no grease, it would go on fine, but there is a high possibility that it would seize on there. So we're going to go ahead and just put a bit of grease on there and then slide the hub. And this hub should slide on nice and easily by hand. Now I did clean it up with a bit of emery tape, but look at that, that has gone on. Now if it goes halfway on and it gets stuck, then there's something wrong with that bearing clip and you need to take it off and have another look at it. Do not hit it on because you will damage the bearing. So we've got the nut on. I'm just going to wind it up and torque it. Now there is a bit of a procedure to this. Someone might argue with me, but I like to just tighten it up loosely and give it a couple of spins. And then what it is, it's 300 Newton meters, but I'll do it to 200. It did say to rotate it backwards and forwards and other things, but I just rotated it forward a bit, and then I rotated forward and back just to give it a kind of, make sure that bearing is nice and loose. And then, yep, so I rotated backwards then forwards, and then go and finish the torque then with 300 Newton meters. So that is the torque. Now there is another type that's, I think it's 420 or about that, and that is for the longer stub axle. So these shorter ones, or the single wheel, they are 300 Newton meters. So again then, I'm going to hook my pry bar in like I did earlier when I undid these bolts for the disc. Now I'm going to go ahead and torque the disc bolts. So I've got my torque wrench here set to 72 Newton meters, and in a star pattern I'm just going to tighten up one at a time. So there's one, wait for the click, and then the second one. And you can see here I'm kind of doing opposites but off to the side, so you kind of get the pattern. I will go around it twice so you get to see, hopefully I do it the right at the same time. But like you say, you just need to make sure you pull that disc to that hub nice and even. So that's why they say to use like an angular motion, or like a star motion, star pattern is what they kind of call it. So the next thing we're going to do is clean up our brake caliper carrier. Now these clips here are a bit of a nightmare. Don't be careful when you're wire brushing, because they can fly out, which is what I was trying to point out a second ago. So what I like to do is just short little kind of brushes with a wire brush to give them a nice and clean. Now they are stainless, so they should clean quite easily. I just want to give them a good clean just to kind of get all the crud off them, and then take them off. Now this is where people don't realise your issues are. So you can see it's stainless. Underneath them clips, what basically happens is this carrier corrodes, and you can see lumps of rust forming. Now this is what makes your pads tight, this is what makes your brakes squeak, this is what causes you overheating of your brakes and all sorts. So you need to get this as clean as possible. A lot of people, when they just change pads, they never clean this rust off, and you can see it there, lumps of rust which pushes on that clip, which makes that brake pads tight. So what I like to do is give it a wire brush and then get a little sharp chisel and just tap it on there to kind of tap off all the rust. Now it does take a little while, it is a little potchy, but you'll be surprised. All you're doing is just flicking off all that rust and getting it nice and clean. Once I've kind of scraped it and give it a rub, and just something nice and hard. You can do this with a screwdriver. If it's really on there, you can get a chisel and a hammer and just give it a couple of light taps, but you don't want to put grooves in it. You just want to literally knock off any loose rust, and that's what I'm basically doing here, is just kind of scraping off anything, rubbing down and getting off anything I can. And then up under the underside as well, make sure you're getting all them corners. Same on this side, and then give it a good wire brush, and you should see then, it might be a bit pitted once you've knocked all that rust off, but as long as it's not protruding, then it's not a problem. So I'm a bugger for copper slip. A lot of people might disagree with me, but I think the best way to stop this rusting is to cover it in copper slip. So that's what I like to do, and then put the clips back on. And then you can either put some copper slip on the pads as you put them in, or what I like to do is cover these clips. Not too much, I don't want it pouring onto the disc, but I like to just put some copper slip on these plates, so when I push the pad in, there's not copper slip underneath the pad, just to kind of stop it from seizing. So any excess I'll wipe off with my finger, because I don't want anything going on the disc. And you can see I just put a bit there on the surface where the pads are going to run. So I'm going to do the other side now, but I'm going to fast forward it. There you go. You know, I wouldn't expect you to sit through that twice. And you can see there's my carrier now all ready to go back on. Now the next thing is the sliders. This is another really important thing when you do brakes. You need to remove these slider pins. You can see this one is a solid pin all the way. So I'm going to give that a wipe off with a rag, get rid of any excess, any grease that was on there. I'm not too worried about the hole, I just want to clean the pin. And then by here we got some red rubber grease. Now this is the grease I use. There is other greases out there, but you cannot use petroleum based greases because it eats the rubber that the boots are made out of. And obviously what tends to happen is you get that grease on the rubbers and then they all swell up, and then water gets in there and the pin seizes. So make sure it's some sort of rubber grease that obviously won't affect rubber. this pin by here, you'll see has actually got like a rubber piece on the end of him. So this one's even worse, to be honest, because if you get grease, normal grease, you know, petroleum-based grease on this one, then what will happen is that rubber will swell and it'll actually jam the pin. And I tell you what, they take some getting out when people do that. It really baffles me. But yeah, you've got to make sure you don't use normal grease on there. You make sure you use something that's rubber. So we're going to fit that carrier now. So we'll put some Loctite on the 2 bolts. And we'll go ahead and install the carrier. So I'm not going to move the camera. You kind of know what you're doing. I'm just going to go ahead and insert these 2 bolts. There we go, there's one, and then the lower one. There we go. Skip forward a bit. I just tightened them up with a ratchet, and then I'm going to get a bar. Now these are very important bolts, so make sure they're nice and tight. Just 1/2 inch bar, give them a firm push. There is a torque setting for them, but I don't torque them up, I just tighten them up hand tight. And we can go ahead and fit the pads. Now remember, this one goes on the inside. There we go. And the other one goes on the outside. So you can see there it hasn't got the pin and obviously hasn't got the slot for the wire. Now I should have clipped the wire in by here, but for some reason I forgot. So I went ahead and pulled the slider in and fitted the caliper. Now it's okay. We'll just put the top bolts in. So you can see here now I've put some Loctite on these 2 bolts. Again, make sure they're nice. Make sure they're nice and tight. So I'll insert the top bolt. Now this is about the point where I realised that I hadn't fitted the wire, so I was going to go ahead and do that. So this wire now needs to be slotted into the inner pad by the piston, and there's a lump on it that needs to be towards the disc. So we click that in. It was a bit awkward, but like you say, if you can do this before you put the caliper on, it will make your life a little bit easier. And then slide the bottom slider in and push that into place, and then we can go ahead. Look at that, you can check there, it's all clipped into the pad good. And then we can go ahead and fit the bottom bolt. There we go. So I'll tighten these up now. Again, remember 19mm spanner to hold the slider, and we'll go ahead and tighten these 2 bolts. Just a firm tighten on these. They're only a little bolt. There you go. And the bottom one. There you go, nice and tight. So now we got them in, we can run the wire in for the pad wear sensors. You can see there now the hub spins lovely, so that's what we like. So we're going to run this now. This goes over the top of the caliper. Remember that boot that covers the bleed nipple for the caliper just clips in the wire. I will show you once it's done, and then down the other side of the caliper, and then you can go ahead and plug that in. So here we go. That's all on, spinning nicely. You can see everything's nice and tight. You can see here now, obviously the disc is a little bit dirty, but once I break down the road, that'll all clean off. You can see the wire there running through the boot, down the back, across the axle, and if I move this light, you can see here that it's actually plugged in and all ready to go. And that's it. That is actually it. We are all good.
Right then guys, so I'm not going to show you how to put a wheel on. I pretty much think you can figure that on your own. Now, the handbrake is off right now, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pump the brake pedal as hard as I can before applying the handbrake. Then I'm going to torque my wheels up and do it all tidy. The reason that is you want to basically push the piston all the way out before you apply the handbrake. It's quite standard stuff. No rocket science to it. So the only awkward thing is that wheel bearing I showed you. If that little clip comes out, sometimes when you're knocking it out, the bearing can jump out and that clip comes detached. So all you've got to do is just basically put the clip back in, basically take the clip out, make sure the bearing is pushed from both sides so it's not pinched together, and put the clip back in. If you can't get the hub on with your hands, then either the clip isn't on properly or there's something wrong, or if you tighten the nut down and the hub won't spin nicely, you've done something wrong. So take it back off, have another look. They can be a bit potchy, but fingers crossed it'll come off. If your hub is crazy tight, I've seen it before, but not too often. I mean the hub to the disc, you can use a press. We've got one here. I don't use it very often for that sort of thing. Usually you can just tap them off, but if you can't get it off and you're hitting hell into it, yeah, just go and find a press and press it out. But yeah, so I hope this video helps, guys. And yeah, all I'm going to do now, I'm going to clear all my fault codes, take it for a drive, obviously make sure everything's all right. I'm looking at that disc. I'm adamant that's why my ABS light keeps coming on, and now I got a nice new set of pads and discs on the back. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. Can't explain how much it helps my channel, and also by commenting. I appreciate every comment I get, good, bad, whatever. Hell, pick on me if you want. The way I do it, there's so many different ways of doing this job, you know. I'd love to hear if you've got any better ideas. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and see you in the next video.
And if you get value from this video, hit the like button and subscribe to support this channel.